this said, I'm ready to kick off the content program of the event, and I'm particularly happy to start with a friend of Frontiers and a friend of Elsewhere, Tony Australia. Tony is an expert in global digital health. He has been living through multiple continents and now lives in Singapore. His focus is on helping companies scale to and from Asia, but Tony is also a fiction novelist, so you can tell he has a very wide background. So with this said, I'm really happy to welcome on the virtual stage of Frontiers Health Live, Mr. Tony Australia. Tony.
Hi, how are you, Roberto? Can you hear me okay?
Hey man, I can hear you perfectly fine. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Well, good evening from Singapore.
Great, and welcome to this first Frontiers Health Live. So you have a special role to be the first segment host that we have. So tell me, man, what's the status right now in Singapore, real quick?
Well, you probably are seeing in the news that the numbers of coronavirus positive people is increasing. And to be honest, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It just means that a lot of testing is happening. I think as we'll hear from many people over the course of the day, between testing, contact tracing, social distancing, these are all steps that are important, that are necessary to make sure that we continue to flatten the curve and actually watch the metric that's most important, which is number of people that pass away, unfortunately, from this pandemic. And there's only 23 deaths in Singapore right now. And so overall, despite the fact that we're on lockdown and month 2 being at home, feeling pretty good about the fact that there's a lot of information that's actively being shared. So overall, pretty happy here. And across Asia Pacific, obviously the pandemic started in China, and there's a variety of different data points that are being studied. But all in all, I think the global community and what you're doing here with Frontiers of bringing people together to share information, share insights, and be able to work together to get to the other side of this pandemic is fantastic.
Yeah, that's exactly key to the spirit of what we are trying to do today. So we are up with our introduction time. This is a more TV than on stage event. So without any other further ado, I'll let you start your introduction of the segment. And for now, I'll hand over to you for the next minutes. Thank you, Tony, for being with us.
No problem. Thank you, Roberto. And hello, everybody. And for those of you who are tuning in here to watch around digital biomarkers, it's important that we get a quick definition around what digital biomarkers means. And for that, it really is a consumer-generated physiological and behavioral measures collected through digital tools, things like smart devices and smartphones. And there's a number of different companies that are tackling this challenge. We're fortunate that we have 2 incredible CEOs who are going to be discussing what they're doing with their respective companies to tackle COVID-19, and even looking at the other area, which is there's still people who require some sort of active monitoring and detection in their own existing health challenges. So we'll hear from 2 companies. The first is Bioformis, which is now a US-based company. I'm fortunate to have known Kuldeep for several years now when the company was originally based in Singapore. After they raised their Series B almost a year ago, they've been on this fantastic journey to expand their platform, which is called BioVitals, which you hear more about. And the second company we'll hear from is Altoida, which they will discuss their FDA and CE approved digital biomarker, which is focused on Alzheimer's and mild cognitive impairment. In this category of looking at how do we look at data and get to early detection, I think we'll learn a lot from what Kuldeep and Richard will share with us. So with that, I'd like to first turn it over to Kuldeep, who can share with us more about Bioformis.
Awesome. Thanks, Tony. All right. Hi, everyone. Pleasure being here. And I'm Kuldeep, founder CEO of Bioformis. Today, I'm going to be talking about a little bit of what we do as a company, how we have been able to use digital biomarkers and analytics to be able to manage patients with complex chronic condition. And then, of course, in this pandemic, how we pivoted, bundled our solution for managing patients with COVID, and some of the results we have from that. So to give you a very high level perspective, our entire mission at Bioformis really has been to improve patient outcomes while minimizing the cost and burden of care by really being able to deliver precise intervention at the right time. And the way we do that is by capturing active passive data from patients, using a lot of data science and machine learning to be able to predict decompensation in patients ahead of a critical event, and finally integrating that into the clinical care pathways to let clinicians and nurse teams to manage their patients. A very high level overview about Bioformis. We have built a single platform called as BioVitals for therapeutic decision making, which I'll talk about. And as a company, we have been primarily focused on three broad therapeutic areas: cardiometabolic, respiratory, and oncology. We take regulatory and quality seriously at Bioformis. All our products and software are developed through strict regulatory standards, CGMP standards. We have 3 FDA authorizations, and in fact now 5 approvals outside the US for our software and platform in Europe, Australia, and various Asian countries. We are a team of around 120 plus full-time employees headquartered in Boston, with offices in Singapore, Zurich, and India. In the past 6 months, we are fortunate enough to acquire 3 companies, BioVotion, a wearable sensor company, to give us an ability to capture passive physiological data from patients. We recently acquired Guido Health, a LA-based company, which primarily focused on building digital therapeutics platform for managing patients with oncology, post-chemo, post-radiation therapy, and Hashtag, which was a software development company based out of India, raised over 45 million in venture funding with some institutional investors, including Sequoia, MassMutual, EDBI. And as a company, we primarily work with a variety of pharmaceutical companies, as well as large health systems. So directly to move into BioVitals platform, if you look at BioVitals, the platform is a full stack software modular platform, which essentially has 3 main key pillars to it. Starting with patient-facing tools, the ability to capture passive data using sensors and active data using patient companion app. And as a company, of course, we are device agnostic, and the thesis really is not to flood patients with multiple sensors, but have one single sensor patients wear on their body and forget about it, and we are still able to capture all relevant biomarkers. And from active data, these are a variety of feature set which embed into a patient companion app. And depending on the use case and the therapeutic area, we plug in the right features. And these could include things like medication management, goals, patient-reported outcomes, communication between caregiver, patient, content education, etc. All that goes to our second pillar, which is our analytics engine. And from an analytics perspective, we have over 200 modules, but to put it in a very simplistic way, it does 3 things. One is it has the ability to either detect or predict decompensation in patients ahead of a critical event. And once you do that, what do you do next? The second piece is really being, intervention. And these are intervention which can be therapeutic intervention, essentially the right optimal dosage to the right patient at the right time, or a behavior intervention, depending on the disease we are targeting. And finally, integrating that into the clinical care pathways by providing clinicians and nurses the right tools to manage these patients. We, of course, the platform has the ability to do EMR integration, and we have done bidirectional integration with your Epics and Cerners. There's medication delivery, and all that thing gets trickled down into a therapeutic specific product candidate across different diseases. And as a company, we have a very strong pipeline across different therapeutic areas, all the way from cardiometabolic to respiratory, oncology, and of course, pain. Just to give you a very high level perspective, of couple of examples, starting with heart failure, on how we build a product and the utility around it. So if you look at heart failure, one of the biggest clinical unmet need today is less than 1% of patients with heart failure are on optimal dosage, and less than 20% of these patients receive guideline-directed therapy. And that's a huge problem, resulting in 1 in 4 patients coming back into the hospital within 30 days. So we have built a platform, what we call as BioVitals HF, FDA-cleared digital therapeutics, which essentially is a 12 weeks program, and patients get onboarded into a platform, go home with a wearable sensor, along with a patient companion app. We are capturing over 15 different physiological parameters continuously in real time, and the app engages the patient by providing the right content, education, medication management, PROs, etc. All that goes to our BioVitals analytics engine, which essentially does 2 key things. One is early detection of heart failure exacerbation, and second is optimizing heart failure medication therapy using our treatment algorithms, and finally integrate that into the clinical care pathways. And all of this, what we build, we validated it in randomized control trials, primarily focusing on our 2 core value proposition of the product, which is early detection and eventually optimization of heart failure medication. So here are some of the results. One of the studies, as you can see on the left-hand side, was done in over 1,000 patients with heart failure with reduced ejection fraction. And it was led by a navigator program, which essentially included pharmacists, nurse practitioners, heart failure cardiologists who were managing these patients remotely. And in the study, as you can see, in the navigator-led program, at the onboarding and at the point of 12 weeks, which is 3 months, we showed significant improvement in optimization of heart failure medication from the baseline, as well as improvement in guideline-directed therapy for all categories of heart failure medication. And if you compare usual care, absolutely no difference between when the patients were onboarded and at the point of 3 months. And that has a significant clinical and health economic benefit. We also ran and published one of the studies this year where it was a randomized control trial for patients with heart failure and respiratory disorder to demonstrate our ability of our analytics for early detection and intervention. And the study essentially demonstrated around 70% reduction in hospitalization in patients with heart failure and 38% reduction in overall cost of care, which really has a big impact in to the payers, but also to the health systems under this whole reimbursement regime. We, from a partnership perspective, signed one major partnership with Novartis for our heart failure product in Asia and the US. In Asia, of course, we are part of the patient support program with Entresto, one of the heart failure drugs, potentially in 6 different countries where the program would be rolled out. Every patient who's prescribed with Entresto gets prescribed BioVitals HF for monitoring them for a 12 weeks program, with the entire intention of early detection and then early intervention to drive better outcomes in patients. We also are, to give you a different example, from a biomarker perspective, demonstrated a significant breakthrough this year where we demonstrated that using physiological digital biomarkers, we are accurately able to quantify pain levels instead of your typical VAS scale of 0 to 10. And that has a big impact in managing patients remotely and with the whole opioid crisis, really driving better management of patients and better optimization of medication. And we are certainly involved in a bunch of different digital programs, all the way from pain. We are involved with a FDA-funded digital biomarker study, which looks at novel digital biomarkers in patients with heart failure, which are patient-centric, to really be able to use this in drug trials to speed up drug approval process, because many clinical trials right now just look at hospitalization and mortality as endpoints, which take a long time to complete. So with that, I just wanted to give you a very high level perspective. Using the Bioformis BioVitals platform, we very quickly customized our platform for managing patients with COVID-19. And as you can imagine, we have been currently, deployed our platform in 5 different countries. We have over 10,000 patients currently monitored using our platform. These are all government contracts. And with the whole COVID pandemic, the market has fast forwarded significantly, and we have been deploying our solution actively in managing, quarantine people to detect early symptoms of COVID-19. We also, have been deployed in community isolation centers or in hospital isolation wards to early detect any clinical complication. We also have programs in the US which are monitoring healthcare staff, because as you have seen, 28% of all patients in China who were infected with COVID-19 were healthcare professionals and nurses. And finally, we have been also involved in a couple of drug trials. And in fact, we recently published one of the drug trials, which was done by, a hospital in Hong Kong for treating patients with COVID-19 who were hospitalized. A significant, impact where BioVitals essentially was used as a novel digital endpoint to track drug efficacy and outcomes. So the platform essentially, again, consists of continuous monitoring using sensors, primarily COVID-related parameters, including your temperature, pulse oximetry, respiration rate, heart rate, activity, all using a single device, along with a companion app to be able to track symptoms, communication between caregiver patient, recording cough audio signals. All that data goes to our BioVitals analytics engine, and eventually the early signs and early alerts are presented on a dashboard. So just to conclude with a couple of slides, these are preliminary data which will soon be published on a large data set. But in this study, we essentially evaluated the impact of our BioVitals analytics engine to detect clinical deterioration or improvement in COVID-19 patients. This is a 34-patient analysis, and the BioVitals index, which is the output, is compared with clinical annotations, including your typical PCR tests, your blood results, your any clinical events, which essentially demonstrated a sensitivity of around 96% and a specificity of around 87.5 in detecting clinical correlation accurately in conjunction with your clinical event. And all that was done in real time, as opposed to clinical events, which were certainly very episodic and in time. And we also showed in the US, as you know, hospitals are just getting overcrowded, and clinicians are looking at ways and strategies to stratify patients, free up bed days to provide care to patients who need attention. And using the BioVitals, we also demonstrated BioVitals had the ability, using the first 3 days of in-hospital monitoring data, to be able to predict clinical status and average length of the stay. And again, in this case, achieved an AUC of around 91% to detect clinical deterioration. So with that, I will stop, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Kuldeep. Appreciate it. Really, really insightful, and congratulations on the ability to be so influential and be so quick to respond to this pandemic.
Thank you.
And clearly, you've been able to move and find ways to make your platform very relevant.
Absolutely. Thanks.
All right. So thank you. And so now with that, we'd like to now introduce our second speaker. As I mentioned, digital biomarkers has been very applicable, as we saw from Kuldeep, in evaluating how to be impactful in COVID-19. Now we'll hear how digital biomarkers can also be helpful for people who might be dealing with other conditions or concerns, such as with Alzheimer's and dementia. So Richard, if I can ask you to put your slides into full screen mode, please. Can hear you fine.
Okay, perfect.
Great.
Well, thank you very much. I am greeting you all from hot and sunny Houston in Texas. It's a pleasure to be here with you again. I enjoyed really the meeting in Berlin. So I'm just going to dive in, Tony. It's good to see you again and the whole team. It's a pleasure. So when we actually started and implemented Altoida as a company in Switzerland, we embarked on a noble mission to better brain health of the patients with Alzheimer's disease. To actually be more exact, MCI due to Alzheimer's disease, so mild cognitive impairment. And we have developed an app, a medical device, classifying patients at risk of MCI due to Alzheimer's disease, 6 to 10 years prior to onset of symptoms. So when patients are pre-symptomatic or non-symptomatic, we can catch those 6 to 10 years in advance, and that's amazing. We use our machine learning models that classify the patients at either at risk or with mild cognitive impairment. And why do we do this? Because it's a huge problem. Alzheimer's disease becomes a burden. We are all very familiar with dementia. It's a devastating disease, a threat to global economy and health budgets in general. It's a global prevalence of 50 million. If we look, over 30% of population will be over 65 in 2025, okay? And I will not count to those yet, but if we look at the aging population in 2050, I will be definitely part of those. And those are the focus markets that we actually also are focusing on, like Germany, Japan, US, the biggest market. And the aging population is growing tremendously, especially also in Japan. Now, current methods that are used to identify Alzheimer's are invasive, okay, like CSF puncture, lumbar puncture. They offer a low accuracy. They're not scalable. They don't offer a very early detection at our device, 6 to 10 years in advance. They're very costly, like MRI and PET scans, and they require continuous monitoring. Now, in times of COVID-19, our device offers, a telemedicine version where patients can actually do the assessments at home, and the clinicians can read the patient report and the outcomes real time. And this offers a great benefit. But what if you could detect MCI due to Alzheimer's disease actually up to a decade prior to onset using just smartphones or tablets that works both on iOS and Android, which is great. And just an easy test, which is clinically validated in various studies and peer reviews with a 94% diagnostic accuracy rate. And this is compared to the gold standard testing, MRI, EEG, PET scans, and so on. And our device is the Altoida NMI, this is the product's name, is FDA cleared as a class 2 medical device and offers reimbursement in the US, where we actually also are based out of Houston, and it's also CE marked. But how does it work? I just want to go over, the 1 to 3 steps that are very easy. It's a 10-minute test. Our machine learning models offer then an NMI score, a machine learning score, and the clinicians are then provided with a real-time patient report that they can review in the dashboard, which is HIPAA compliant and GDPR compliant. We don't store any data on the devices themselves. As I mentioned, it's a 10-minute test. So we start with the motor test, and what do we actually measure? So you have to do some certain geometric figures, trace them on the screen of the devices. We're looking at the response speed and accuracy. The second test is kind of like, just explain for everyone. It's like Pokemon Go, but scientific. So fun activity. You hide and seek 3 virtual objects in your real world environment, and you have to find them back. And we look at spatial memory of the patients. And then a similar fire drill where patients have to, execute a fire evacuation drill, and we're measuring the perspective memory. Both of those virtual tests actually are done under dual test conditions. So you have a high pitched and a low pitched sound that the patients have to differentiate and recognize. And we're looking there at executive function and psychomotor processing speed. Very easy. What we want to see, obviously, is in the report a green, which means healthy outcomes for the patients, or yellow and red, obviously, it's a high likelihood that the patients have mild cognitive impairment. And then certain steps need to be taken by the clinicians. We hope also for a great drug to be released soon, aducanumab from Biogen or Eisai, which we have engaged with both companies successfully for now. This is all I can disclose at the moment. But if you see on the right, we don't only generate the patient report, but we offer a monitoring feature so that you can trace over time how the patient have developed, which is fantastic. And pharma and research facilities can actually go deep into the data. In all the 583, now it's over 600 features that we offer. I like to call our device, you remember the movie, The Universal Soldier? So I like to call our device and our app, the NMI, we are the Universal Soldier. Why? We're not just only focusing only on one feature at a time. So we include and look and assess 11 different cognitive domains, like the motor coordination, planning, processing, inhibition, flexibility, visual perception, now currently also voice, and perspective memory, spatial memory, and all those, with a super high accuracy, as you can see. But the key advantages of the Altoida NMI is obviously the early detection, right? And monitoring. This is what we like to claim, and this is where we have our discussions with peers and other organizations that are very interested in early detection of dementia patients and tracking of symptoms in time and measuring those and the therapeutic outcomes, like aducanumab, for example. All right, but other advantages, non-invasive, as I mentioned, it offers a high accuracy rate, over 94%. It is also scalable, and it offers the independence, and that's very helpful in remote assessments that we offer during COVID-19. It also helps the patients, but more importantly also the clinicians who would lose over 30% of the income, not be able to call the patients in the clinics. And it's also very economical compared to the gold standard. We have our patents, publications, a new one is coming out this year in Lancet with very exciting data. And we work with reference centers and European grants. Radar AD is one of them. But the impact of COVID-19 has been tremendous. And I mentioned the 30%, 30 to 40% of our customers, doctors, clinicians have lost, over 30 or 40% of the income, not being able to see the patients in the clinics. And social isolation and social distancing is a burden for patients that are prone to MCI or Alzheimer's disease in general. In March, telehealth visits surged 50%, and this is great. Okay, analysis now expect general medical care visits to top 200 million. Visits in ambulatory clinics have declined actually 60% in May, and primary care physicians use more telemedicine now than before, and telehealth becomes the first line of treatment, which nobody has really thought. I always proposed it to our investors, and they said, "Man, maybe it's not the time, right? Telemedicine, let's see what's happening." But due to COVID, we have been able actually to move quickly, and that's great because it offers various benefits, as we know, protect the patient and healthcare professionals from cross-contamination risk, which is important. The legislation has actually removed many of the cost barriers, also in Japan, Brazil. Germany is doing a great job. US in general, President Trump has pushed the telemedicine adoption highly. Telehealth helps maintain the health professionals' income. And in combination with digital health and digital therapeutics, we have a lot of companies that present in that space as well, offers a high level of medical service, and that can be maintained. Here, currently, we offer two approaches to providers, like telemedicine providers. I'm just naming MyDoc, Teledoc, those guys, American Well, those are telehealth providers, as you know, and also to practitioners and clinics, because doctors had to find a solution how to see their patients, even over borders, state borders or internationally. So we offer this opportunity for them, a solution for brain health. The strategic drivers are telemedicine will become a major pillar of future healthcare. We know that. And Medicare reimburses the telemedicine now even more with normal CPT codes that will be implemented. And in crisis time, the CMS and is supposed to develop even further all those codes. that have been implemented in COVID-19 times. And Altoida NMI ensure that physicians can service elderly people with cognitive dysfunction remotely, which is very important in our view and in our customers. Just for the understanding of everyone watching, to date in red, the physician practice, so you have a patient or family member that raises a concern, a cognitive concern to the clinician. The patient is invited, the PA manages administrative tasks with the patient, then the physician conducts a paper test during the first visit, discusses the mental history with the patient, and then the PA collects the data, physician reviews and takes decisions about the next steps. Well, we simplify this, being able for the patient to actually do the assessment remotely in the comfort of their home, and the clinician being able to see the results real time before he even interacts with the patient. The Altoida NMI, therefore, can be done by the patient in a home environment, without stress and cross-contamination. The cognitive assessment can be conducted by the physician assistant prior to the visit. The test results are instantly available, which is great. The score and classified risk of MCI.AD is available right away. So those are fairly good advantages for the dementia, pre-dementia patients with MCI. But some post-pandemic predictions that I would like to mention. I'm not going to go in all, but as telehealth grows mainstream, this is what we might see over the next few years. And I'm happy that Oliver Wyman actually put those 12 post-pandemic predictions on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to use those here. From my point of view, as Rita, for us, I will mention 5, number 1, 2, and 3, 10, and 12. The convenience and timelessness of access become 2 major value drivers. Okay, the doctors are more comfortable with virtual care, and that's going to stay. And most importantly, the patients and family prefer it as well, because that was a mindset, as you know, and we're dealing with elder patients over 55. Okay, and the virtual visits will become actually the new front door for doctors in urban, but more importantly in rural areas where patients don't have access to specialized clinicians. Telehealth reduces the caregiver burden for those patients with severe chronic diseases, and social distancing actually accelerates the guided self-care use and innovation, which is fantastic. Quick overview of our vision. So we're not just an Alzheimer's specialist and MCI. We are building the world's most comprehensive and scalable digital brain health platform for cognitive diseases like multiple sclerosis, traumatic brain injury, TBI, and POCD, post-operative cognitive disorder. So we now have also one of the products ready, the NMI Tele, as we call it. We have the NMI Research and NMI Medical. And the digital therapy is developed by us when we like to partner up with other companies that are specialists in this field. We don't want to do it. We could do it ourselves, but strategically, we could partner up with companies out there in this space. Quick overview about our funding history, and I'm very excited to announce, April 20th, we closed a convertible note round with our newest addition to the investor syndicate, which is Hikma Ventures, and Lana will be speaking later on investment during your fantastic event. So I'm just saying hi here from Houston, Lana. We closed our Series A in May 2019, and we have a lot of run rate, and it's actually doing very well. So if you want to join us for better brain health, please reach out to me, and we can discuss collaboration and whatever you're interested in. Thank you, Tony.
Great. Thank you so much, Richard. Really helpful overview, and congratulations on the recent funding, especially in this time we're in, to be able to secure capital. I'm sure it's a nice breath of safety net for you in the company.
Yeah, we had enough run rate. But hey, listen, if you can get a great investor on your side, don't say no. The money is maybe secondary for us, but it was the network that Hikma Ventures offers to us, and the advice, and just it all comes together. So thank you.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And so, both you and Kuldeep were able to bring some really good insight to us. And I love the stats you were showing around telehealth and Kuldeep's vision of where he's bringing his platform. When we've heard this from Roberto, and I guess Satya Nadella from Microsoft said something that was similar, which is we've seen more acceleration in digital in the last 2 months than we have in the last 2 years. So that's been great to see.
Yeah.
So, I think overall, as we look at, and I think we're having Roberto join us here as well, so that we can have a discussion. Overall, I think one of the initiatives that I've been part of recently has been it's called Future Proofing Health, and it's something that's been supported by Roche. And as we've been looking at the future of APAC, and they've done some work in the EU into 2050, this period of time we're in around digital biomarkers and how COVID-19 fits in is going to be very influential to what we'll be doing as an industry and shaping our actions for the coming years. Roberto, do you have any questions, comments based on what you've heard?
Tony, thanks so much for being perfectly on time. Let me just share a message with the audience and stay with me for a few more minutes if you can. We are managing this event by studying every other segment on the exact timing so that people can join right when they choose to follow. So we will start the next segment at 52 minutes. Meanwhile, Tony, given we have some little more time, you mentioned about this project that we talked about a few months ago. Of course, tell me more in the context, of course, of you can say. I'm very curious how large-scale companies, and of course we are involved with a number of them, are responding to this and also building on the crisis, which I remember to our all fellow followers live, that crisis comes as a word from the ancient Greek and means change. Only recently took this a more of a negative kind of meaning, but truly it means change. So in any crisis, there's a seed for a meaningful change. So Tony, what do you observe in Asia about large-scale companies taking this challenge, this crisis, as an opportunity to kind of leapfrog, if any?
Yeah, good question. And I think you can bucket companies or organizations into those who see the value of data and information and are using this as an opportunity to cast their net wide to find the right types of partners to be able to bring in the information that helps them move forward. An example would be, if I start with Singapore, Singh Health and Health Catalyst, which is another company that we know well in the Frontiers Health family, have recently announced that they're working together. And I've been doing work to support Health Catalyst, and they have a fantastic team, and the experience that they have built up in the U.S. with working with 500 hospital systems is immense in terms of their insight and understanding of technology, as well as their ability to plug into different hospital systems from around the world. And so you're looking at probably one of the leading public hospital systems working with one of the strongest technical data platforms from the US, and that's a fantastic combination for Singapore. I think a second category of what you will see in the coming 12 months is we've heard so much about the numerous companies working on vaccines, trying to help us get to a better place in the new normal. And we're hearing about it as independent pieces of work right now, but what we'll find is as data comes together in especially looking at some of these Asian institutions where they're seeing let's aggregate our patient populations and see what we can learn to accelerate vaccine development. That's been fantastic. And then the last point I'll make is going back to Roche. Roche is one of those companies that has an opportunity to influence vaccine development. But overall, as an organization, from what they've done with Flatiron Health and Foundation Medicine, and looking at bringing in other products into their portfolio that go beyond the pill, they really are looking forward into the future of not just 2030 or 2040, but even to 2050. And that's where I've gotten involved with them as not only a panelist on their APAC expert panel, but also because of my work as an author. And in that category, we're putting together some exciting things that we'll be showcasing and bringing out to people over the next few months with some really exciting events and information through the rest of this year.
Great. So let's see if we will be finally having the Berlin in person. That might be about the right time for this farther, writing and fictional kind of venture of yours. But I'm getting this question on multiple channels. I want to anticipate that. So if will not happen fully physical, it will for sure happen blended, or at least will be virtual. We are learning today collectively how to run this in a more kind of engaging way, or at least we hope so. And so that will pose the foundation for the rest. Tony, it has been a great pleasure to have you with us. Thank you so much for accommodating the late time, but it's so early morning, in San Fran. So this is the beauty and the course of running this globally. So thank you so much for being with us, and we'll see you very soon.
Thank you so much to Roberto and the Frontiers Health team and the HealthAware team for pulling all this together. Really appreciate it. And thank you to Richard and Kuldeep for fantastic presentations to kick things off.
Thank you, my friend.